Bolliger & Mabillard, or B&M for short, has been building coasters for 30 years now, starting with Iron Wolf, a small-scale stand-up coaster for Six Flags Great America in 1990. Over the next decade, they would create several different coaster models, including the inverted coaster in 1992, the sit-down looping coaster in 1993, the dive coaster in 1998, the floorless and hyper coaster in 1999, but in 2000, a behemoth would completely rock the coaster world.
At the turn of the millennium, there were signs.
In 2000, Cedar Point and Intamin would introduce Millennium Force, the first full-circuit coaster to break the 300-foot barrier, creating the world's first Giga coaster. Intamin would produce one more Giga with Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion in 2010, and even Morgan would top Millennium with their Giga Steel Drag in 2000, and Nagashima Spyline a few months after Millennium opened. B&M was finally able to get in on the Giga Coaster rage in 2012 with Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. They also built Fury 325 at Carowinds in 2015, and the new for this year Orion at Kings Island. With these B&M Gigas being very successful, people have speculated if B&M would be willing to go bigger, even 400 feet. Intamin is currently the only manufacturer to have built a coaster over 400 feet, but many people are wondering if B&M could do the same by building a taller, faster, and longer version of their Giga coaster. In this video, I want to talk about just that. Will B&M ever go Strata? I want to talk about not only when this might happen, but also where and just how viable and likely would this concept be for parks to build. When and will might B&M build a Strata coaster? First, I want to go into the general viability of this happening. Starting with B&M as a company, I believe they could do this. They are a very experienced company that has built tons of coasters, and they very likely would have the time and resources to build something like this. Overall production of B&M coasters and amount of parks buying them has definitely dropped in recent years. But they are still building several coasters a year, but only 3 are planned for 2020 and 3 more for 2021, which is a fairly low amount. They're still producing large coasters like Hyper and Giga coasters with Candemonium and Orion this year, so I do believe they would potentially be willing to go bigger with the Hyper model. For those of you who don't know, the Hyper and Giga coasters by B&M are the same model, so the Strata would certainly be the same way, using the same trains and track type. They seem to be putting a lot of investment into the wing coasters recently compared to most other models, but could still be willing to innovate into a completely different size and scale of coasters with a bigger version of the Hyper and Giga model. So I believe a B&M Giga can happen, and the company would be willing to put the time and research into this new type of coaster if a park might be interested in this concept. Cost and land are two absolutely massive factors for a coaster like this, and very much affect a park's decision to get one. It would certainly be extremely expensive and absolutely massive. Leviathan cost $28 million and Orion and Fury 325 both cost $30 million, which is quite a high price tag. The general interest for most parks in large original expensive steel coasters is dropping, which makes B&M coasters out of the question for most parks, especially a Giga, in which a Strata would be even more expensive than that. A larger version of the Giga from B&M would likely run a price tag of $35 to $40 million, just taking a prediction. It could depend on what type of layout and length the park would want to go for with this coaster, but it would still be very expensive, making the range of parks one could go to very, very small. This would certainly take up a ton of land, being the other factor making it out of reach for most parks. Most parks just don't have the land for something like this. Parks could go with the Strata that interacts with the pathways in the park itself, but they would need to get very creative. And the park itself would just need to be this size to fit in a coaster of this scale. Now, this could very much work for very high attendance parks because it would be a capacity machine just like their Giga coasters. It just depends on if a park needs this type of coaster. This would absolutely inflate attendance, but would it have a good return on investment? Leviathan and Fury definitely did, but we can only predict with Orion. I believe this type of coaster has a very good chance on a good return on investment for a park, but with the extremely high price, we really can't know. With these combined factors, the viability of a B&M Strata coaster and the likelihood of a park getting one is very low, but it is still possible. For the parks I could see maybe getting one, there aren't many at all. Cedar Fair does still buy from B&M, so if they really wanted to get something world class, they could easily add one to one of their parks. It would seem redundant to get a Strata in the same park they already have a Giga, so that leaves Kings Island, Carowinds, Cedar Point, Canada's Wonderland, and Kings Dominion out of the question. Now, Cedar Point and Kings Dominion don't have B&M Gigas, they likely won't be getting one. Cedar Point is a park full of record-breaking coasters, but they simply don't have the land for it. In the King's Dominion's timeline of major new coasters and their current plans for a potential B&M Wing coaster, I just don't see this happening, even though it would add a lot to the park and would be very different from anything else at the park currently. Knott's is a more major Cedar Fair park, but it's completely landlocked, and the smaller Cedar Fair parks would never dream of getting something like this, leaving only potentially California's Great America. Now, the park's current 5-year plan shows a B&M Hyper, but because of the park's size and scale, they would just never get a Strata. Six Flags has shown itself to be the discount chain, and I don't see them ever adding another large-scale B&M coaster to one of their parks again. They haven't added one since X-Flight at Great America back in 2012. Disney and Universal just would not be the parks to add something like this. Merlin has not added a B&M coaster since Flug der Dämonen in 2014, and a coaster this scale just would not be a likely fit at any of their parks. Looking at James' timelines and past can very much help predict the future, which is what I'm trying to do here. Now, there are plenty of independent parks recently adding large-scale steel coasters, and they are very attractive to new guests. However, this type of coaster with its massive scale just seems out of reach for really most independent parks' interest. Even Hershey Park, which is growing very fast, doesn't seem to be a park that would ever invest in a coaster of this size. Now, I do have a few parks in mind that could build this, which I'll talk about right now, and I potentially have 3 in mind. Now, there is one park with a very bright future in America, Dollywood. They are getting a huge new expansion and coaster for 2021, but I don't see it being on that huge of a scale. It would definitely outdo Fury 325 only a few hours away, and it's not impossible, but just seems very unlikely. Fuji-Q Highland has actually not added a major coaster since 2011 with Takabisha, but will be adding a major new coaster in 2022. It is rumored to have a $32 million US price tag, which could definitely fit that Strata price tag. This may seem crazy, but we have no idea what they're adding, but it will be huge, so this is something to keep in mind. Finally, we have a brand new and fast-growing park, Energylandia. This park is adding a major coaster almost every year at this point, and I could even see something at the scale of a B&M Strata in their future. They're mostly working with Vekoma, and I don't know how likely a B&M coaster is in their future, but it's another thing to keep in mind in case this park takes a huge splurge. So I just talked about where I think a B&M Strata might go, but now I want to talk about when. So for Fuji-Q Highland, I'm going to look at each of those 3 parks I just mentioned. Fuji-Q is getting that new coaster in 2022, so I could see a Strata coaster coming to that park during that year. Dollywood, as I mentioned, not likely, but could be coming with that expansion in 2021. And Energylandia, I'd probably see this coming around maybe 2023 or so. I think they're going to have a few more coasters before they might do that, and they'd probably honestly take a break before and after that, just because it's such a big investment. So I'd say around 2023 or 2024. And any other park that might add it, I could honestly see it coming around that time, probably around 2023. I mean, this park could even open at one in 2021, but I don't think they're going to start working on the new concept like this right now, and just get something open for 2021, but I could see probably 2023 at the earliest for a B&M Strata. Now, I just want to quickly talk about what I think the ride experience could be like. So I definitely would see a bigger version of the Giga layout and elements. The B&M Giga is mostly focused on like really fast bank turns in the first half and more like airtime in the second half. So we'd probably definitely see something similar to that, but a lot bigger if B&M did build a Strata. These elements would be a lot bigger. They'd be taken at much bigger speed. I just think it would be a fairly similar style ride. This would be kind of the first style ride like this to see a 400-foot coaster with this kind of longer style layout for a longer style coaster. But I think this would be pretty crazy to take elements at that speed and just with that insane scale. So that's just what I think the layout and experience would be like if B&M did build a Strata coaster. So just to sum things up, I think the viability for a B&M Strata coaster ever coming to a park is very small and unlikely. I just don't really see this ever happening. I don't know if B&M would be interested in making a coaster like this. I think they're already doing enough now. I mean, I definitely can't see many parks getting one. B&M did come out with a Strata coaster concept And the reasons for that should seem pretty obvious from what I discussed earlier, land, cost, and just overall size of the ride. Those are just my thoughts on if B&M would ever make a Strata coaster. What do you think? Do you agree with my thoughts? Leave all those down in the comment section below. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more coaster content coming soon, and I will see you guys later. Bye.